basically, Anne and I have known each other for hundreds of years. We both started out in poetry at round about the same time. I'm originally from Plymouth. Anne has run a care home in Liscar for the last 40 years. So we knew each other from poetry 35 years ago. And then I've spent a lot of time away. And then I had a previous partner who was a lot older than me, who developed dementia, early onset dementia. So I found Anne again and relied on her for help and information. And I eventually had to put my previous partner into a home. And then Anne and I got together, and we've been together 15 years, but we married 5 years ago, 4 years ago. Is it? I don't know.
It doesn't really matter.
Whatever.
We did the deed.
We ran a poetry festival near Liscard called the Bodmin Moor Poetry Festival, which ran, it was a very small bijou sort of festival, and it ran very successfully for 8 years. And then, of course, COVID came along, and sadly we've not got it back up again since then. People keep saying in the area, when are you going to start it again? But I think we've kind of lost the impetus, and running the care home has become more and more complex and difficult. So both of us have kind of lost poetry for a few years, but we're kind of working our way back to it now. So when we first got together, we were living apart, and we kind of sent each other poems instead of letters in a way, and wrote about the similar subjects or experiences that we'd had together from the different points of view, which eventually became a book after COVID. So in the second half, we'll be talking about and reading from that. But to start off with, we're going to do a few from different periods of our lives and different books and whatever. So I will start with this one, because I like to start with this one. This is called You Don't Have To, and it's for the Welsh writer Niall Griffiths, because it came out of a workshop that I did with him. You don't have to. You don't necessarily have to be drunk to be a great poet, but it helps. I have slept in a skip, swum fully clothed in a freezing reservoir, fallen off a first floor banister, driven a car into a dry stone wall. But the fact that I survived them all shows that I was never really serious. I still like a drink, can turn a witty phrase, handle my line breaks with the best, but I know I'll never be a Dylan, Rambo or Verlaine. Don't want to be that suicidal, alcoholic, murdered or insane. For many years of my life, I was in Wales through work, and I went there to work on the Year of Literature in 1995, and I thought I was only going to be there for 18 months. And to paraphrase Dylan, I got off the bus and never got back on again, and ended up staying there for 16 years, running the literature festivals and events at the Dylan Thomas Centre in Swansea. Everybody kind of drives past Swansea and goes to Larne, not realising that actually most of the great early stuff that Dylan wrote was written in Swansea from his bedroom window. And the whole Dylan Thomas thing has turned into a massive industry. And this is a true story. You can see it's dated because it says that the poet's 50 long years dead, and of course he's 70 long years dead now, but that doesn't scan, so I'm keeping it with the 50. And this is called Dylan's Trousers. A pair of Dylan's trousers is for sale. They've turned up uninvited, so it's said. You have to spot the intentional puns, like turned up. They've turned up uninvited, so it's said. The poet, though, is 50 long years dead. Though short of leg, there's tallness in this tale. It seems that up the garden path we're led. A pair of Dylan's trousers is for sale. Though fond, it's said, of supping best Welsh ale, our man was happiest writing in his shed. The poet, though, is 50 long years dead. Sartorially, it's clear he'd mostly fail, as in life he so often lost the thread. A pair of Dylan's trousers is for sale. Such strides as these are quite beyond the pale. It's clear a total turkey we've been fed. The poet, though, is 50 long years dead. Destroyers of his reputation fail. His words, despite their efforts, are still read. A pair of Dylan's trousers is for sale. The poet, though, is 50 long years dead. People would turn up with all kinds of things. Somebody even turned up with a vial of sweat, which he claimed had belonged to Dylan Thomas. The great story I always love to tell people is about the Browns Hotel in Larne. And this is where Dylan, for years, did a lot of his drinking. And for some reason, Dylan Thomas is better known in America and much better loved in America than he is in Wales, certainly. The landlord of the pub, when I first went there, was still the same landlord who'd been there when Dylan was there, and then his son took it over. And it was always besieged by Americans. And this guy was very, very clever, and he would have a tatty old dartboard in the pub, and he would say to the Americans that came in, "That's the dartboard that Dylan Thomas used to play on," and he'd sell it to them for 50 quid or something. Then he'd nip down to the basement and bring another one up, hang it on the wall. And so, where are we? This one, yeah. Like most people who write, I've tried to do different things in different genres, and I've had a few goes at writing short stories, and they always end up being poems. And this was a poem that was a short story, and I decided it didn't work and turned it into a poem, but I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to do this one first.
Are you? Okay.
Got my list wrong. Okay. So I grew up in Plymouth, and my mother used to clean for people, and she cleaned for a very old Jewish family, and she used to take me along before I went to school, and I was a prodigious reader even then, and even after school in holidays I used to go with her, and that's where this one comes from. It's called Water Biscuit. Top of the stairs, old Mrs. Joseph, propped on pillows, hands at sheets like flat fish groping for air. The landing below, a boy wedged between square of light and stair rods, glinting like cattle truck bars. His comics, Look and Learn, The Beano, Dandy, Tell Me Why, while his mother cleans and the old lady cries for water biscuits, cars. Topper, Smash, Charles Buchan's Football Monthly, superheroes, wars, fantasies, reassuring grip, outshading truth's grim comic strip in neatly ordered squares. Trapped, though, in the fetid air, a taste forever on the tongue of burning flesh, of water, ashes, a gasping groan, dust and blood and clawing earth, the flake and snap of brittle bone. So I kind of don't know. I just was starting to write a poem about a childhood reminiscence, and suddenly, because they were Jewish, it ended up being about that. Sometimes you just don't know where they come from, really. And this one, as I say, was a short story, which didn't work, so I turned it into a poem. And the title is And, basically the ampersand, and I use the ampersand all the way through to just keep the lines tighter together. And he was having no luck for hours and not even a nibble. Down to the last dregs in the flask, one fag left in the packet, when they started coming down like every cliche in the book. The skies opened. It was raining cats and dogs, except that it wasn't. It was raining fish. Plaice and cod, mullet and bass, perch, carp and tench, fresh water and salt, large and small. And he was running here and there with the big net, swallowing them up for a pastime, and still they came. And he ran to the car and got a plastic sack, and then a laundry bag, then emptied a litter bin, filled that, and still they kept coming. And they wouldn't stop, just kept on falling. And then the sky grew dark. And that was when the biggest ones began to fall. And then the shark. Some years ago, unfortunately it's no longer there, I used to go to a place in Reigate, which was a writer's retreat strictly for men, and it had been left in trust by, there are some of you around, I reckon, who would remember Reckitt's Blue, which, although it was blue, was apparently supposed to keep your shirts and blazers nice and white. And I remember my mother using it on my dad's shirts. And this was Mr. Reckitt. Eventually they became Reckitt and Coleman, and he sold it out for an absolute fortune. And Mr. Reckitt was a Sunday painter of no great skill, but a great admirer of the arts, and a single man. And he left his massive house in Mount Pleasant in Swansea and all his money in trust as a retreat for writers and artists down on their luck. And then eventually it became a place where you went even if you weren't particularly down on your luck. But it was a bit like this place, a nicely kept secret. Unless you knew about it, you didn't know about it. And it was an extraordinary place. And all the guys who went there were mostly very old, and had wonderful stories. Some of you may remember the philosopher and music expert who ran for Parliament once, Brian McGee, had a TV show. Incredible man. He practically lived there. And there were all these weird, eccentric characters. Does anybody remember a guy on the radio called the Man in Black? Anybody old enough to remember that? This is really ancient. And I mean, I'm going back 20 years or 30 years now, and the actor who played him was still there, and he was about 95, and he used to come, and every time he would be thinking up and trying to pitch a new idea to the BBC for a new show, and he was 95, incredible character. And that was the place. And you listened very carefully if you were one of the younger members to all the stories, and occasionally you'd pick up a snippet like this, which is a true story apparently. This is a little feminist poem. It's called On Reflection. The parting shot of the writer, Ivy Compton Burnett, was to leave the gift of a mirror to the 12 vainest men that she'd met. And I'm just going to finish this section with a more recent poem, if I can find it. It's on a bit of paper. There it is. Round about this time last year, we went to the graveyard in Peveril to try and find my mother's grave to lay some flowers, because my sister, who doesn't live around here, likes me to do it. But it's never easy to find for Mother's Day. So this is Mother's Day flowers. This year I visit with tulips, fail to find my parents' headstone, but stumble over my maternal grandfather, for decades lost. John Henry Husband, died March 1968, who gave me the baldness gene, and it would seem the dodgy prostate. The tulips I've left for you. Thanks a bunch, John Henry, mate. Thank you, Anne.
Okay. I hope this won't be too miserable. I'm reading from a book called At the Gate, which I put together after the partner before Dave was actually killed on the A38 in a road traffic accident. And it's very complicated. There are a lot of poems in here that are a bit difficult to read. to a small audience, obviously. But one of the things that I didn't realise was you wait so long for a coroner's inquest. So it was a year before we even got round to finding out what had finally happened. And he was killed just before Christmas. And so we waited till just before the next Christmas before this happened. So it was always a bad time. And it's always a bad time. But what they did was they had the CCTV of the last time that they'd seen him, which was in a garage getting petrol and sandwiches. And they asked me if I wanted to see it. And so this is a little poem about that time called CCTV. Each frame freezes long enough to seem robotic. We watch a woman stacking shelves on her knees. The door opens and you come in. There he is, our voices lift with joy, as if you were returning. We watch you choose a fizzy drink, sandwiches, stopping at the chiller. I guess BLT. The policeman says 3 cheese savouries. That figures if there were no BLT that day. You rest one elbow on the counter, you sign your name. I think you smile, but the jerky black and white is grainy. I want to weep, my throat aches, but I'm shelled out, dry with despair. It all now seems such a long time ago. You don't know Jago. You don't know Janie's pregnant. You weren't in Prague, Milan, the Cinque Terre. And I think this in a small room with 2 of my sons and 2 policemen in full uniform. I had asked to watch it on my own, to watch you more intently. We're here to understand the how, the why, the when, and today's the day I can ask questions. The coroner nods in my direction, but I shake my head. I've been asking questions all this year. Where are you now? And can you see me? So that was just kind of an introduction to 1 or 2 poems that follow on from that. And I chose, what did I choose? I chose Mercifully Ordained because it's so set in Plymouth. I'm between cataracts, so I'm finding it very hard to work out what to do with my glasses. It's really quite complex. In fact, it makes me feel slightly demented. So this is, I don't know if any of you remember, there used to be a really lovely little cafe called the Canadian Muffin Company on Armada Way. Really, really delicious muffins. And every time I came into Plymouth to go shopping, that was my treat. I'd take myself in there. And what I found, and I'm sure you'll understand this, was when I missed Alan, I didn't miss the time we were young together. I missed the fact that we weren't going to grow old together. So I never looked at young people and envied them. I looked at elderly couples and thought, that's not going to happen for me. Little did I know. So this is called Mercifully Ordained, that we may become aged together. It's from the book of Tobit in the Bible, from the story of Tobit and the angel. And that was their wedding vow that they made. I was in the Canadian Muffin Company in Armada Way, waiting for an extra large latte, cinnamon and chocolate, and a white chocolate chip muffin to take away. When I saw them, he was helping her get into her coat. He held it out for her as if the sleeves were winged, while she gracefully turned her back to shrug it on. At this point, he did a little jink, more of an imperceptible hoik on the balls of his feet, so the coat lifted neatly over her shoulders and tucked under her neck, and then he freed her hair from the collar. He must have done this for years, the exact same thing for years. I watched him pick up the shopping, she picked up her bag, and I collected my latte and my white chocolate chip muffin and walked out into the rain. And then something very strange, apparently, this is something that quite often happens, is that when you've lost someone suddenly, you kind of imagine they must be there somewhere. Maybe they're just hiding, or they'll suddenly appear. And so I used to dream about that, and a lot of people have said that that's the sort of thing that happens, is that you dream that they're just literally somewhere else, and maybe you'll find them again. And some people talk about walking in crowds and thinking that they can see them in front of them. And this was just the thought of what would happen if somebody did suddenly come back years later, and what would that be like? One night you'll come back, and I'll wake to see you moving noiselessly in your socks. You'll look bewildered, because nothing's quite the same. You'll be hunting through the drawers, wondering where your clothes are. I won't move or speak. I'll try not to breathe. I'll want to say, look in the wardrobe. I saved your Levi boots and leather jacket. I'll watch you lift photos in their frames and take them to the window. Some faces you won't know. You'll guess at Beth, and I'll watch you sink to your knees, cover your head with your hands, and I'll hear you whisper, Nick got married. I'll watch you disappear to the bathroom, hear you brush your teeth, hear your pee, see you reappear with a glass of whiskey. You'll sit on the edge of the bed for ages, until you turn to lift my hair and touch my neck, and then hold your mouth there. And then you'll say, so what happened? And I'll say, well, how long have you got? And then one of the things, which I think was a really good idea, my publisher said when she was very excited about this book, but she said, you've got to move forward. I want you to show people that you moved forward. And so what she asked me to do was to write a poem for every month of the year, which was really nice to see the progression of the year and how things moved on. And so every time I do read from this book, I like to read the poem for the month that we're in. So this is March. And Dave woke up this morning, almost March. Dave woke up this morning and said, it's spring. And I said, so why are you suddenly saying that? He said, I've heard the geese come back. So that was, it's nearly March. I didn't want to read February. February is just, even in my poem, it says the drip, drip of its melancholy trees. I didn't really want to read February. So we'll look at March. We're nearly there. Two black flutes tell me geese squat in the marshy clumps of marigold. I hold my breath and watch my dogs run past, snuffling, hell-bent on early evening rabbit. An empty train clatters by, but you can't distract them. In Roseanne's wood, there's cherry blossom, a sudden gift on yesterday's bare trees. There are windflowers now among the aconite. Buzzards cruise the sky, calling through the canopy on the top hill, where the coroner's clerk found a signal to tell me what happens next. What happens next is March, the 3rd March, ready or not. I climb the gate, the dogs slip through the hedge, and as I trudge the riverbank, they swim upstream, heads and tails above the stringweed, which soon will break white stars across the water. Soon the garlic will come, stitchworked, campion, and Graham will let his cows out. We'll have to walk the road because the dogs can't be trusted, and I'm nervous of the bull. It's 17 degrees. I'm in my shirt sleeves. Last week it snowed. What happens next? Nobody knows, except the dogs, who wait patiently, lined up beside the hose. So I'm just going to do a couple of poems from here before we read together. In the middle of all of this, I had power of attorney for my mother, who was declining into the most wonderful and hilarious dementia, and also obviously very difficult. But that's what I do for a living, and so it was lovely to be able to support her, but very, very difficult. And what I wondered in all of this is what a shame it is that we just have one mother, because they're such amazing things. And when you lose your mother, you've lost so much. And I read a poem by another woman poet saying she wished she had more sisters. That was a lovely poem, saying that if she'd had more sisters, they could have shared all the difficult stuff and she wouldn't have had to do it all on her own. So I loved that poem. So this is called I Wish I Had More Mothers, after Brenda Shaughnessy. I wish I had more mothers, enough to have one who wasn't exhausted, and another who could have sat typing night after night, spell checked the papers, while another would sit on my bed when my sisters were fighting and know it was deadly and serious and they couldn't both be right. One mother could have been effortlessly elegant, dabbed at cologne with her fingers, knocked them dead at funerals with her ethereal smile and the black lace of her hat. We could have been haunted by the smell of her when we sorted her clothes. There could have been lipstick and nonsense of underthings frothing in rows. Another mother could have been the dreamer. She could have gone wherever she thought might be sweeter without us. One could have painted, appeared at lunch with flake white on her cheekbones or the bridge of her nose. I could have walked away from the gloating mother knows best and gone to another. I could have given up on the one who smoothed it over without wanting to know what it was. I could have turned to the mother who knew every bit of it because she'd done it alone and by herself. I could have hugged the mother, cuddly but absent-minded, who let her soft flesh fall from her corset, but left her shopping where she'd bought it round the town. I could have kept the one who had no idea where we were, what time we'd promised to come home, and lied for us as a reflex, but not the one who wept when it all got beyond her and said we'd all made her life so difficult and really let her down. I could have left the one who thought prayer was the answer to pray on her own. I could have had a mother who could cook, who haggled in the market, who came home flourishing something exotic that wasn't green. There'd be a mother for each sister and my brother. I could have had all these mothers round for coffee, made little cakes. But in the chatter and laughter and the clatter of the cups, no one would learn anything or come home different. But I would have tried. I'd want the one who cried in the pantry the first Christmas I was nursing to have told me and let me feel loved. I'd be able to laugh at the one that rang to tell me my new boyfriend needs a baby, as if I ought to try harder, forget about the cancer or the 30 years too late. Because I'd have the one who thought I was a triumph through every failure, whose mind was still sharp and tender, who could listen, and who still had enough of a whistle to call up a dog. So, thank you. In the middle of her dementia, when I told her all about Dave and how we'd met, and we were both of us much, much older, she suddenly said to me one day, I think David probably wants a baby. And I thought, oh God, where did that come from? This is all a little bit tricky. So I'll just read one more out of here and then we'll read some poems together. My father had an interesting take on dementia. Rather like the Englishman abroad, he felt if he shouted at her really loudly, then surely it would all be all right, she'd understand. So we had an awful lot of difficulty with this. I tried to explain to him that if she'd had a leg in plaster, he wouldn't be shouting at her to run. And really, it was much the same thing. She couldn't understand, so please, please, stop shouting at her. He had a wonderful garden and a terrible difficulty with vermin in his garden. And this, he told me that, and this is the title of the poem, that when the late Queen Mother was asked, looking back at what she would count as the greatest difficulties of her life, said rabbits, apparently. If he could run, he'd be running now, down the back steps, barely clinging at the rail, dressing gown flapping, slippers trodden at the heel. He complains now it's harder to dispatch them. He says it's all in the wrist and his are feeble, and the way they kick is terrifying. He knows the law. He inspects his traps daily from his bedroom window. He double bags the bodies and recycles them in the black waste bin. But the rows of enemy dead are listed in his diary, each a thin black biro crucifix, 144 in the last 4 months. Mice he traps indoors with chocolate. 1 room upstairs and 2 more down. The snap is fiddly for his twisted fingers. His walking stick has worked loose at the handle. Its click and tap, can be heard in every corridor. In the last skirmish, Mouse 46 is recorded dead. If he only knew how they were getting in. Fresh droppings all along the kitchen worktops and in the cupboards are of no importance to my mother, who is losing her agenda. On days he can't leave the house, she claps her hands and smiles to see whole rabbit families safely feeding on his lawns, manicuring his perennial beds, their piles of pellets shiny on his raked gravel paths. Right, so that's that.